You can find our fourth presenter at davelandry.com. Please welcome Dave Landry.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you to Festival of Traders for having me back once again. Today I'm going to talk about why we are not made to trade and what you can do about it. More importantly, what you can do about it. Before we do that, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. I appreciate you being here. There's a disclaimer screen. As you know, you can lose money trading, or as I often sum it up, all predictions are about the future, and a lot of stuff can happen between now and then. Now, this is a tremendous amount of information I'm going to cover today, but keep in mind it's not one and done. You can go to davelandry.com/fest, put your email in, and you can get tons and tons of information. I'll send you some follow-up information on money management, psychology, the methodology, enough to keep you busy for a very, very long time. And you can always email me, or if you have questions, you can call, and I'll bring up this slide towards the end of the presentation for those of who are interested. Now, most people are interested in the methodology, and money management psychology tends to take second fiddle, comes next, right? When Dave Mecklenburg approached me to return to Festival of Traders, I said, hey, you know what, I really want to talk about psychology. He says, well, you know, people are more interested in methodology. And I said, I know that, but I've done methodology presentations over and over again. And it became a bit of a what you want to hear versus what you need to hear. And if you're a setup junkie, and come on, aren't we all? You have to remember that the greatest methodology in the world is useless if you don't have the proper mindset to follow it. And that's why trade psychology is so important. Now, it's a bit of a chicken and the egg, or chicken versus the egg type of situation, because you don't know how you're going to react trading a methodology until you actually trade it. But I can talk in some general terms, and there are some specifics I can cover and will cover today. For instance, the psychology of the market is the same regardless of your methodology. And then there are some psychological and physiological aspects of you that are detrimental to your trading. And that goes for all of us. And I'm also going to talk about embracing your methodology, and I'm going to use my imperfect methodology as an example, because no methodologies are perfect. There is no holy grail. And then there's good news about all this. Even though we're not made to trade, there's some really good news, and we'll get to that towards the end. I'm going to give you some tips, some tricks, and some so-called hacks to make you successful, provided, of course, that you want to be. Now, that's a subject in and of itself that we'll have to cover some other day, but let's assume that everybody here wants to be successful. So let's talk about the psychology of the markets. Now, the reason technical analysis works is because the participants often behave in an irrational manner. I think Yogi Berra said it the best. He said, if the world were perfect, it wouldn't be. Now, I have a corollary to that. I think that if markets were perfect, they wouldn't be. In fact, that is a fact. It's the imperfect nature of the markets that allows you to capitalize on the emotions of the other. So if you think about it, if you're trading with technical analysis, you're reading the emotions of the market's participants through charts, and you have to embrace your own in order to act on what you're seeing. Now, the urges of those others is what actually makes you profitable, with one caveat, provided, of course, that you're willing to embrace your own emotions. I was speaking at a trading conference back in October in Las Vegas, and one of the speakers brought up something that I had forgot about. You're trading traders, not markets, so you can never forget that. Tom McClellan was talking to the American Association of Professional Technical Analysts way back a couple of years ago in New Orleans, and he gave a pretty good speech about, well, a really good speech, I should say, I've been using it over and over, about how when you make a trade, you're forming a relationship between you and the company, but you're also forming a relationship to anybody who bought the stock prior to you. And he went on to say that those people will screw you. Now, also in the AAPTA is a friend of mine, Dick Fruth, who I met through the organization. And Dick's been around for a long, long time. Right now, he's managing a few $100 million over in Houston, Texas. Very successful money manager. And way back in the day, he started off as a broker, and back then people didn't actually trust the brokerages with their shares, so they held them at home in a safe deposit box or wherever. And when people would come in, the older guys in the office would just snatch the chairs out of their hands and give them the ticket and send them on their way. But Dick's a little bit more gregarious than that. He would sit them down and say, "Okay, what's going on?" He says, "Well, I'm getting married. I'm getting divorced. I've got this death in the family. We're settling estates. My kid's going to college, so I need some money for that. Or I'm buying a house." Now, if you notice anything in this list, none of these have anything to do with the underlying company. So remember that people sell stocks for a variety of reasons. So keep in mind that you're dealing with this emotional being, which is made up of a lot of emotional beings, and one of which is actually you. I think Mark Douglas said it the best: all it takes is one a-hole to screw up a perfectly good trade. Well, as I'm working on my slides this morning, I put in a bad order. And I got a bad fill because I was stupid. It's like sometimes I'll work on these slides, I'll talk about not doing these things, and then I make a mistake. So all it takes is one a-hole to screw up a perfectly good trade. Now, I'm not sure I caused the market to slide or anything, but I did put in an order that got filled below the bid. And if somebody would have had some kind of certain stop order in place, they could have got triggered it also. So never forget that you're trading traders and not actual markets. Now, there's only one reason you should ever buy a stock, and that reason is to make money. Now, before you beat yourself up, I want to let you in on a little secret to trading. The number one secret to trading is there is no secret. So don't beat yourself up because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. No one knows exactly what a market will do next. Not you, not me, and certainly not the guy who screams on TV. So the point is, do not stress because you do not know exactly what will happen next, because no one does. Now think about it. If someone truly knew, they would own the markets. Now, marketers love to prey upon you because they know that you are searching. And like in life, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I was asked to mail out something that said exactly this: make 10 million in just 10 minutes a day. And you really can't make this stuff up. Now, the fact that no one knows what happens next is actually huge. This means that we're all playing on a level playing field. And the hardworking little guy can compete with the big boys. And in some cases, a small private trader has some advantages. We've been trading IPOs, somewhat thinner IPOs, for the last 4 or 5 years, and we've been doing very well doing that. There's been a tremendous IPO bull market. So this is actually an advantage to the smaller trader. So it's actually liberating, and the pressure's off. Now, let's talk about the psychological and physiological aspects of you that are detrimental to your trading. Keep in mind that the same things that are keeping you alive physically and making you successful in life from a psychological standpoint can actually be detrimental in your trading. So we're not made to trade from a physiological standpoint. And I'm not a neuroscientist, and I don't even play one on TV, but I have stayed at Holiday Inn Express, and like you, have experienced physiological aspects of why we're not made to trade. And this is my actual reservation from last Friday at a Holiday Inn Express. So there's my proof. But the point is, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I have studied the amygdala a little bit. And I know scientists argue within themselves. But it's safe to say that this part of your brain does control your emotions. And it's also involved with memories and a few other things. But it's mostly responsible for the perception of emotions such as anger, fear, and sadness. And it's a very small part of your brain. Now, it's fast acting, and it often shuts down the rest of your body when faced with danger in order to stay alive. So when you are faced with this imminent danger, there's not much time to contemplate your navel, which is really great for a flight or fight type of situation. It's great for back in caveman times, But in trading and other non-life-threatening situations, not so much. And this creates a lot of stress within us. Now, this is the actual back of my business card, and it's I'm somewhat serious about this. You should be able to draw an uptrend, a downtrend, or a sideways trend. Greg Morris was at Traders Expo last week. He was just there to visit everyone. It was his birthday, and he wanted to celebrate with everyone. And he figured it'd be a good time to get everybody together. And he asked me what I was doing the following day. We were having dinner, his birthday dinner. And I said, well, I'm going to speak for 4 hours all afternoon about trading. He goes, well, what are you going to talk about for 4 hours? And he was making a little uptrend sign and downtrend sign. And I said, well, I'm going to talk about that, but I'm also going to talk about things such as the amygdala and how it makes you kind of panicky and how you have to do some little tricks with yourself to get around that. And then we got to talking about aviation because Greg was an F4 pilot and he was also an airline pilot, commercial airline pilot. And we got to talking about some of his war stories, and he goes back in his book, Investing with the Trid, talking about the simulator days too. And in the simulators, they would try to fool the people or stress the people out so they would make mistakes when the lights were blaring and alarms are going off and pull the wrong lever or shut down the wrong engine or something along those lines. And he was not immune to this, but the way he got around it was he would wind the clock. So when lights and buzzes start going off, or even in real-life flying situations where he has lost an engine, first thing he would do is wind the clock. Now, in doing that, and back then, keep in mind that we're an analog clock. This is an actual F4 cockpit, which I downloaded off the internet. So by doing that, it would slow him down enough to where he could get past the amygdala, past that little emotional, panicky part of his brain, to the rest of what's sloshing around up there. So here's a little exercise for you in life. The next time you find yourself getting ready to have an emotional reaction to your spouse or significant other, I would say don't and count to 3. You're welcome. Now, since I started talking about this in my slides, it has saved me a tremendous amount of arguments. Now, if you ask my wife, she's like, no, it hasn't. Well, believe me, there's been many times where I didn't actually say what I initially thought out of anger or whatever the case may be. So you don't want to wake that little panic monster that lives down there in the limbic system or your amygdala. And keep in mind that regret is a bigger motivator than reward. And you start putting yourself into a state of regret by making too many decisions. So you're going to have to learn to make fewer decisions, but better decisions when it comes to trading. And the point is that you don't want to wake the panic monster unnecessarily. Dr. Robert Maurer wrote a book called One Small Step to Change Your Life, the Kaizen Way, and I would recommend everyone here read it. He gave an excellent speech at that aforementioned conference, and he says to tiptoe past your fears. So borrowing from him, the point I'm trying to make here is that you want to tiptoe past the panic monster when you go to make those emotionally charged decisions. Now, trading is unlike life in many, many ways, but it's like life in certain ways. So trading like life, you try to say, involves making decisions and living with them. Now, making decisions is easy. Living with them is not. Making the decision to marry the most beautiful woman that I ever met in my life was a pretty darn easy decision. Living with her is not. Now, in all seriousness, it's impossible to make any decision, even what you might have for supper tonight, without emotions and stress. So you can't eliminate stress from your trading. Every decision has emotions and stress attached. People who have had injuries such as an illness or some other type of either an illness or injury, I should say, and that part of their brain is damaged, they can no longer make decisions. So it's safe to say, and no one will argue, that you can't make decisions without stress. Now, every night I lay out a trading plan. and that plan involves an entry, a stop, a trailing stop, or whatever the case may be. I lay out an exact plan, so there's no questions. But even though I'll lay out an exact plan, let's say enter XYZ at 740, let's say the stock triggers, well, a day or two later I'll get an email. Hey Dave, should I get it even though the price is higher? Or maybe the decision might be decision number 2, should I get it even though the price is lower? Or should I just wait? So we took one decision, which was a bit of a concrete decision. We knew where we were supposed to get in, but by not following that decision, not following the plan, you ended up with 3 and possibly more decisions. So the point I'm trying to make here is every time you don't follow the plan, it creates more and more and more and more decisions. And as you can see from this slide, it begins to grow geometrically really quickly. So you must reduce the amount of decisions you make by simply following the original plan. Now, I know it's a lot easier said than done, but it really is that simple. Simple, of course, not easy. Now, what happens is the more observations you make, the more likely you'll end up in this state of regret. And as an example, I was literally writing an article on the state of regret and how you get into the state of regret. And we had a position that was up 20% for the day, and I was pretty excited about that. Well, I looked back at my screen, and then all of a sudden it starts backing off, and it was only up 15% for the day. So had I checked my screens at the end of the day, I'd have been pretty happy about that. But instead, I'm like, wow, now I'm down 5% on this position. So by making too many observations, you will put yourself into the state of regret. So you have to reduce the amount of observations that you're making. There's an old Wall Street adage that says, be as close to the market as you need to be, but no closer. Now, I'm a swing trader to intermediate term trader. Sometimes we'll hold positions up to a year. I don't need to be watching every single tick, nor should I. Now, one thing to remember, getting back to that decision-making process, we're only wired to make so many decisions. This is especially true in the heat of battle. This is why the burnout rate is so great in people such as air traffic controllers. I asked the doctors that made my presentation up in New York, what's the burnout rate on an ER doctor? And they said about 7 years, much less in a more high-intense, let's say, inner-city type of environment. So let's get back to you. You're motivated and a person of action. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here trying to learn more about trading, right? Well, that's great for life in general, but not so much for trading. Now, I spend a lot of time doing a lot of research on things that I don't act on. Steve Edmondson said something very similar. Ken Lambert said, doing nothing is harder than it looks. And then Charlie Munger said, it takes character to sit there with all that cash and do nothing. I didn't get to where I am going after mediocre opportunities. And, of course, I think Tom Petty said it best, the waiting is the hardest part. But if you're a person of action, as you have demonstrated by being in this webinar today, then unfortunately trading is going to be a little harder for you. So again, you should only trade to make money and never for action. As I have told many of my clients, and when they finally get it, they fully agree, trading done properly can be quite boring. So if you are looking for excitement, I have a couple suggestions for you. First of all, go to Vegas, and then that way you can have some fun and maybe a pretty girl bring you a drink. Or have an affair, because if you have an affair, you can only lose, what, half of your money. Now, again, trading all boils down to patience. And again, it can be very boring. You're either waiting for steps or you're waiting for the market to move. I think Jimmy Rogers said it the best. I just wait till there's money lying in the corner, and all I have to do is go over there and pick it up. I do nothing in the meantime. So you want to plan your trade and trade your plan. Obsess before the trade and not afterwards. So in a nutshell, trading psychology is markets are emotional, and so are you. You have to embrace that fact. Now, I do have some good news, but first, some bad news. We're simply not made to trade again, and that's from a physiological standpoint and from a psychological standpoint. So you have to, again, tiptoe past your fears. And the way you do that is you, just for one trade, follow your plan. Follow your plan for just one trade. On your next trade, no matter what, say, I'm going to follow this plan. And if you find yourself getting ready to micromanage or abort your plan, then breathe or wind the clock. I went on eBay early this morning, and it looks like you could pick up an old vintage clock. I don't know if it works or not, but at least you could give you something to do for a few seconds to maybe get past that amygdala and get to the rest of what's sloshing around up there, keep you from panicking. So that could be just a physical thing you could actually do to tiptoe past your fears. Positive self-talk can be very beneficial. I'm going to follow this plan regardless of the short-term outcome because I know that I will only become successful longer term when I consistently follow my plan. And I would suggest that you write that down. Now, the real world versus the trading world, logic doesn't often apply. So markets are emotional, obviously, and so are you. Action is what makes you successful in life, again, but patience in the market is key. In life, failure is not an option. If you're an engineer and half of your bridges fall down, or if you're a doctor and you kill half of your patients, you're not going to be a doctor very long. But in trading, you could be wrong quite often and still do quite well. Now, it's not your fault. You may have had 10, 20, 30 years or even more of bad training for trading. I asked this question a few months back, and I got an answer because it just baffled me. Why do the same people who strive for perfection in life, doctors, lawyers, automatic transmission mechanics, engineers, why do they settle for such mediocrity in the markets? And I got my answer from a psychiatrist. And basically, she says that they can't wait around for a perfect pitch. They have to take whatever train wreck comes at them. And she went on to say, we have no training to prepare us for sitting on our hands and waiting. It is simply not part of our mindset. So if you can separate your career from trading, your life's going to get a lot better. Now, in life, obviously, you have to have a high degree of control. You got to where you are through a high degree of control. But in trading, you don't have control, or not much. You can only control yourself. The serenity prayer comes to mind. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Unfortunately, many of us pray the genius prayer instead. God grant me the courage to change the things I cannot accept, serenity to accept the things I've changed, and the wisdom to know I'm different. Now, this is obviously kind of tongue-in-cheek, but there's volumes of behavioral finance books just on that fact that we think for some reason we're different and immune to a lot of these things we're talking about. Now, you can control some things. Before the trade, you can plan your trade out. Obsess before you get into a trade and not afterwards. It's been proven that if information is uncertain or changing, your stress goes up. And that's from the research of Montier in one of those behavioral type finance books. So you want to obsess before, you want to pick the best, and you want to leave the rest. Don't deal with mediocrity. Papa John would probably be a good trader. Better ingredients, better pizza, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Now, during the trade, you should wait for an entry, meaning that the market is headed in your direction. You place a protective stop, and I have special reports on all this stuff. It's going to be in the email that you get on that DaveLandry.com/fest page. So don't worry about keeping up with everything here. You want to take partial profits if the market rallies up to your profit target, and then you want to trail a stop higher. Now, the next thing you need to do is just wait unless there are one of the above things to do. Again, we'll stay with positions as long as they move in our favor, and we ended up in a position nearly a year recently because of that. There wasn't a whole lot to do on a lot of those days. So you can let the market make some decisions for you while you're developing discipline. You can put in a stop order and go about your life. You could put in a limit order, which I'm not a huge fan of, but you could use it to take partial profits. Nothing wrong with that. And then you could use hard stops to stay with a market or let that hard stop take you out of a market. Now, after the trade, you need to do an honest post-mortem. Did you really pick the best? Were conditions really conducive? And if not, did you really have the mother of all setups? Now, here's the tricky part. Did you follow your plan? If you followed your plan, then yes, pat yourself on the back regardless of the outcome. If you didn't follow the plan, you need to question why. And if the outcome from that trade was positive, in other words, if you made money, then you have to recognize that the market has just taught you to trade badly. Outcomes are noisy. Good decisions may have bad outcomes. Bad decisions may have good outcomes. And that's a whole presentation in and of itself. Now, provided, of course, that you truly want to, you will get better and better through the before, during, after iterations as you do more and more repetitions of this. And you'll reach a point where minor tweaks are only necessary. So let's say you're getting stopped out a lot. Maybe you might need to widen your stops a little bit, and or you might want to trade in a little bit better conditions or pick a little bit better setups. Now, an honest postmortem will reveal a lot. A lot of times I'll look at a trade and I'll say, what the heck was I thinking? Now, I don't do that as much as I used to, but over the years, by doing those postmortems, I found I've gotten better and better. You also have to ask yourself, do you truly know your methodology? There are some methodologies where you make a little bit of money, such as reversion to the mean trading, but they have blow-up characteristics. Now, using my methodology as an example, my stuff in trend trading in general can be a little streaky at times, and also can have an outlier characteristic, and I'll show you what that looks like. Now, this is a portfolio for last week, and I put this together for Traders Expo, and you can see we have roughly 5K in profits, but if you notice, most of that, 70% of that, came from just one trade. You miss that one trade, and then you actually lose money. So you have to embrace your methodology and understand its nuances. Okay? It can be a little streaky at times. You print money for a while, then you go back to grinding it out or simply waiting. That's trend following. That's what it is. Again, it can be boring at times. Now, I do have some good news. You know what you're doing wrong? You know what you're doing wrong. A lot of times I'll work with people and I think, how am I going to figure out what this guy's doing wrong? So I ask them, and then they tell me. Jesse Livermore said it the best: a stock speculator sometimes makes mistakes and knows he is making them. Now, I get these type of confessions all the time. I'm not honoring my stops. I'm front running. I'm taking profits too soon. I'm dealing with mediocre markets. And then my favorite is someone emailed me, you know, the passage from Paul, I know not to do, but I keep doing it. I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. So the solution to that becomes pretty simple. It's like the old doctor joke. It hurts to do this. Well, don't do that. Now, I know you know what you're doing wrong, but here's a couple things. Again, are you picking the best, leaving the rest? Are conditions really that good? Or are you exercising proper bloody position management? That goes a long ways. Or are you as close to the market as you need to be, but no closer? As I often preach, money management will cure a multitude of sins. If you're only risking a small amount on each trade, that isn't to keep things from going to your head when things are great, and you won't get too depressed when you get stopped out. So you have to be your own devil's advocate. And one thing I would suggest you do is just honestly ask yourself, is there anything outside of direct trading that could be affecting your trading, okay? Or are you undercapitalized, or there's some situations that's happening at home, or there's some medical issues. So you're going to have to ask yourself those tough questions. Sorry about that. Now, to finish up here, if you find yourself micromanaging trades, in other words, not following the plan, then the hack is simple. Turn off your screens. If you're trading in less than ideal conditions, I would suggest that you find something that's far more interesting to do. If you're hesitant to get into trades, use a stop order to get in. If you're hanging on to losers and hoping that it works, use a stop order. If you're obsessing over open losses, then go for a walk. Turn off your screens and go for a walk. Let the stock keep you in or stop take you out. If you find yourself monetizing open gains, saying, oh, I can pay off a credit card or a car or whatever with the open profits, don't. just make fewer observations and make sure you have a trading account and keep that account just for trading. And again, if you're over trading, just keep yourself very busy. Now, if you're still having trouble, reduce your share size, you might have to go back to the books. Now, in summary, if you still struggle with trading, just follow the exact plan for one trade, and you can do it. So again, this is not a one and done. You can go to this link, and if you have any questions, shoot me an email or give me a phone call if you like. Thank you, sir. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you being here.